All right, welcome back, everyone, to part two of me ranking all the books that I finished in 2025. It was taking a lot longer than I was expecting. I feel like I'm talking way too much, but we're just gonna keep this, flow of consciousness going onto the screen here, and we're just gonna pick it up from where we were. Hot House by Brian Aldiss. I gotta give it an S. There's like two like little things that annoyed me about it, but I think enough. The world building in this book is amazing, and even though it doesn't make sense, and even though none of it is plausible from a scientific standpoint, it was just this awesome, awesome story where the Earth is sort of tidally locked with the sun, and it's millions and millions of years in the future or something, and humans have sort of de-evolved to these tiny, like pygmy tree dwellers, and the entire planet has pretty much been overrun by plants. Plants are now the dominant species, and it's just this amazing, horrific story about living in this jungle world where every, like, being the bottom of the food chain pretty much, and where every plant is out to get you. But it just created this beautiful, beautiful like environment and beautiful ideas of the moon being captured in a web by these giant sort of plant spiders that traverse between the earth and the moon, and just like how some of the characters get to the moon and back, and just what happens to them, and just the journey that this tribe of people go on, and just how everything is described. It's just beautiful, and I loved it. Chronicles of Albert Volume 2. I gotta give this one no, I gotta give it a C. The story kind of blends to me. It sort of got a little weird in what was happening with Amber and what was happening with the main character, in my opinion, and just where the series was going. It didn't capture my attention anymore. Um, there was still a lot of fun things and aspects of it, and a lot of things, involving mirror worlds to Amber, the like one true world, and uh, were like castles in the sky that only appear in moonlight, and all these other aspects. And I thought was a cool idea, but I lost the thread of it. I lost sort of the taste for it. So I got to give it a C. And nothing against it or him. And I have the giant 1 to 10 box set, and I gotta finish off the last five, but I don't have the taste for it. I don't have the taste for it right now, and I'll get to it eventually, but I don't know. Crystal Star by Vonda N. McKintry. This book I got to give a D. Is that too harsh? Yeah. If I put Dark Saber as C, this has got to be a D. This book was hard as well. It has this really cool sort of non-Star Wars concept in it of a one character who is pretty much from an alternate dimension. And it had this sort of fun little story of Han and Leia's children getting kidnapped when they were young, and sort of how they escape and all of this stuff. And the stuff with Waru was, the time, I remember being really cool and interesting. But reading this book again, it was same as Planet of Twilight. It just didn't make sense. The writing wasn't very good. And I just slogged through it because I wanted to get on to the next Star Wars book. But I got to give it a D. Maybe I'm being too harsh. Maybe it's because I remember it so fondly, and then finding out what it is after having not read it for such a long time sort of just ruined it for me, but it's a D. Ventures of the Stainless Steel Rat by Harry Harrison. I'm going to give a B. This is the first three published works, I think, of the Stainless Steel Rat, but I think it's in chronological order. It's like 4, 5, and 6. And each progressive story in it, I lost interest in it more and more. Yeah, I'll give it a B. It's just this fun sort of pulpy space story of, they call him the Stainless Steel Rat. I can't remember what his real name is, but he's this con man, thief, master of, disguise and escape, and just his story in this world of um, pulling off these heists, and crime is pretty much non-existent, and he gets coerced into working for this organization that's uh, you know the best way to catch a criminal is with criminals. So he's sort of like forced into this situation where he has to work for this organization, and there was a lot of like fun little adventures in it. And I had some issues with what happened in the first story. In the second story, uh, I had some issues with he just had there never felt like any danger to him. Every time something would happen and the chapter would end on a cliff note, he would have the perfect escape plan already devised for that exact situation, or things would just work out for him. And he is like this James Bond type character, but I didn't feel like there was any peril. And then the third book involves a lot of time travel and going back to like Napoleon times in France and alternate timelines and things, and fighting this guy who is trying to wipe out this organization by changing the past. And Stainless Steel Rat's the only one that can stop him. And it was just this weird story, but as a whole, yeah, I'll give it a B. It was fun, and it was very clever, like how he would do his crime and how he would catch these people and all of that stuff. But just these odd like things that just bugged me the wrong way. Perdido Street Station by China Melville. I'm giving. Oh, where'd it go? There it is. I'm not giving it a C. I'm going to give it an A. I really love the world building in this. I really loved uh, certain aspects of the story. I just felt that there was too much in it. I felt like even it was like a 700 page, 600 page book or something, but even 500 pages in, he was introducing these new factions and new characters and new developments to the story. And there was so many of these cool ideas in it that I just wanted him to focus on like one or two. And like the weavers, these sort of interdimensional giant spiders are just these terrifying idea where they'll do whatever they deem necessary to make the web more beautiful. And so they can't be reasoned with normally. They will, randomly cut off ears. They'll randomly rip a person apart, just do whatever they want because they can't be stopped. And it's all based around finding these slate moths that are hypnotizing people and eating their dreams in their brain, and just hunt them being hunted in this city. And all these different factions are coming together to try to stop these things. But every aspect of it that was added on new was amazing, but it just felt so much. It just felt like so much. Next I read was Eon by Greg Bear. This is the first book of the Way series, and I'm going to give it a B. There was a lot of stuff in this that I did really enjoy. This asteroid sort of comes to Earth, and it's discovered it's an asteroid that has all these different chambers in it, and the chambers have cities and gravities and light, and it's all empty. And the seventh chamber is discovered to just go on for infinity. And it's this mystery of where it came from, what it's doing, who built it, who designed it. And uh, it's discovered it's from an alternate timeline of Earth that ended up in our timeline, and it's kicking off this sort of big nuclear war on the planet. So it's about these different factions of Russians versus everyone else trying to take over this asteroid. And so it was a really, really fun, awesome story to a point. And then it gets really confusing and really weird. And the science behind it and the explanations behind things just comes out of nowhere, it feels like. And there's these um I don't even know how to describe it. It just jumped the rail. It felt like it had such this solid premise and idea, and then it just added in some elements that just totally lost it for me. It felt like an entirely different story almost in a way. And yeah, everything connects and everything's involved together, but it was just this weird sort of twist almost. And it just took a total turn. And so I have to give it a B. I have the next one in the series, and I want to read it just to see where it goes. But if it is more of the ending of this one, I don't know what I'll think of it. Passage by Connie Willis. I'm giving this an A, and I really did enjoy it. It's about near death experiences and this doctor studying near death experiences and trying to prove sort of what's going on at this point, like trying to not disprove the religious side of things, but trying to figure out what the scientific side of it. And she starts working with this neurosurgeon who has this way to artificially induce these near death experiences in people. And when she goes under for these tests, she finds herself on the deck of the Titanic. And it's this crazy mystery and a lot of humor in it and a lot of, metaphors for, or poking, not metaphors, but like poking fun at like hospital life and stuff like that. But I really love the story. It's almost 800 pages, but I just felt like she could have cut 200 pages out of it and still had the same story. She does a lot of like sort of the same gags over and over in the story. But I loved her writing. I loved the story. I loved the idea of what these near death experiences are and the sort of the mystery of it. I was super satisfied with the ending. It There is a big twist in it that I kind of saw coming, but it resolved itself in a way that I wasn't expecting at all. And so it was a great book by her. It was a hefty book. It was a long, long book. Only thing keeping it from being that S is I just felt like she repeated herself a little too much for me. So I have to give it an A. More Than Human by Theodore Sturgeon. Uh, I'll give this one a B. This is the first I read by him, and it's this sort of, I think he wrote, it's broken up into these three parts, and the second part was originally a short story he wrote called Baby is Three. And so he created these other two parts sort of to bookend this sort of center short story he wrote. And it's just about this uh, group of people that all portray very unique and special abilities of either telepathy or teleportation or um, like the baby in it is this supercomputer that can answer any question, but it's forever stunted and it can only talk through one of the other children. And it's just these group of kids coming together and group of people coming together to form sort of the next stage of evolution. And it was just this beautiful sort of almost poetic story at times. I found I did like the first two parts more than the third part. I wasn't dissatisfied with the ending, but I just I don't know, it just, there was some aspects of it that I couldn't wrap my head around, or I just felt were too far fetched, or anything like that. There was a couple like aspects of it I really enjoyed, but a lot of it that I just felt like I was kind of slogging through. So I'll give it a B. Tales from the Moss Isley Cantina, edited by Kevin J. Anderson, but I think was written by a bunch. I'm giving this one an A. This was a collection of short stories from the Star Wars universe, and they all revolve around the cantina scene from Episode 4: A New Hope. Uh, and it's almost every single alien you see and character you see in that scene in that movie where Luke and Obi-Wan finally meet Han and Solo and get hired off, and the arm cutting off, and Han killing Greedo, and all of that stuff is the central location of this book. But it's taking all those different people in it creatures in it and telling their story about why they're there and how they're there. And I loved almost every single one of them. And it got, yeah, since it's having to replay the same moment in this cantina over and over and over again from different people's perspective, it got a little repetitive, but I loved every little short story. And I loved what they did with all the characters in it. And just to make that scene feel like this huge, grandest, more fleshed out thing, have knowing all the backstory of all these characters. So I really, really enjoyed it. One Day in the Life of Ivan Denisovich by Alexander Slozensky. Probably not pronouncing that. Giving this an A as well. This was another, just sort of not my typical story I read, where it's a fictional book, but it's very much based on the author's experience in a Russian gulag. Much based on his life in that time. And it's just following from when he wakes up to when he goes to sleep about what life in these Russian gulags were. And like Denisovich's, what he goes through in the day, and the work camps, and the bartering for favors and for food, and how you sneak around the guards and everything like that. And so I really, really liked it. And it was a fast little read, but it just, like, once again taught me so much about sort of a subject matter that I didn't know anything about. And I think Alexander like went to prison and stuff for releasing this as well because it painted the Soviet Union in such a bad light. And he later won the Nobel Peace Prize for it and for his work. But it was just this great book, great read. The Hobbit, J.R.R. Tolkien. Uh, I gotta give it an A. I hadn't read this in for such a long time, and I had this urge to read The Lord of the Rings again. And I figured I might as well read The Hobbit because I got this nice leather bound set of all of them. So I hadn't read it for such a long, long time, and I blew through it. It's this classic story. Everyone knows The Hobbit. Everyone knows Bilbo Baggins and all of that stuff. It's this cornerstone of literature. And J.R.R. Tolkien's writing is amazing. And there was a lot more songs in it than I remember, and poems and everything that I sort of skimmed by. But it was a lot of fun to read as an adult again after having not read it for such a long time. And I remember as a kid sort of struggling with it a bit, but I was able to blow through it, and I just got a lot of enjoyment out of it. So got to give it an A. Against the Fallen Knights by Arthur C. Clarke. I'm going to give this one a B. Um, short story. Far future again, dying Earth. It's like the last civilization of man living in this enclosed city that is entirely maintained by these robots, and people are, for all intents and purposes, immortal. And I can't remember. It's about this boy who's like the last child to be born within like 400 years or something like that. So he is totally alone as this young man in this world of immortals, pretty much. And everyone believes that if they leave the city and they leave the planet, it'll invite the intention of this alien force that conquered them in the past. And so it's very taboo to leave the city, but he leaves the city and he goes on this adventure. Just nothing stood out to me when reading it. Nothing captured my attention enough. And then I read this one, and I own The City and the Stars by him, and I didn't realize that was the same story, but in a more fleshed out, bigger story. So I might enjoy that one a bit more because he's able to spend his time on a lot of concepts a bit better. But for this one, I'll give it a B. Demolished Man by Alfred Bester. I'll give it an A. I had a lot of fun reading it. Sort of this detective story, where it's in the future where there's people who can read your mind in the alive on the planet, and not everyone can, but just certain individuals. But they're in all sort of aspects of life now, and so crime is non-existent because, or murder is non-existent because how do you get away with murder when they cops can read your brain and stuff like that? So kind of Minority Report before Minority Report, but it was this fun sort of detective story where uh, the main villain, he commits this murder, and just how he goes about doing it and how he tricks the mind readers into doing, like, getting away with it. And his plan, like, he hires somebody to write the most mind-numbing earwig song that will never leave your head, and he has that song in his brain all the time to sort of like confuse the espers, confuse the people reading his brain, because that's all they can pull off his surface thoughts is him singing this ditty. And just like, but then his downfall and the detective chasing him, I thought was great. Like, I think it was released in 1953. So as a book for the time, I thought it was great. He does a lot of really fun stuff with like the font in the book and the style of the writing on the book to represent people speaking through their minds, the espers talking to each other through their minds. And so I thought that was really clever, but I thought it was a lot of fun, a good detective read. Few tweaks and things that uh, rubbed me the wrong way, but it was great. Light by M. John Harrison. This book, I don't know. I got to give it a C. I feel like I have to revisit it as well, but this book, I did audiobook, and I really feel like I needed to read it to appreciate it. It was this story following these three different sort of timelines and how they sort of meet in the middle. And I couldn't sink my teeth into two of the storylines. I really enjoyed the one timeline. I think her name's Kat. Can't remember, but she is sort of this bounty hunter type who on this spaceship, and she is sort of like built into the spaceship and controlling the spaceship by being physically attached to it, and just like everything on with her on that ship and her story and her plot line I really really enjoyed. But the other two I can't even like remember, or like besides like main key points. So I want to revisit it. I don't know, it's like the first of a book of series, but I don't know if I will do the rest of them. But for my experience with this one, I got to give it a C. City in the Middle of the Night. This I'm making an S. I love this story. Another, just like Hot House, it's about this people inhabiting this planet that is tidally locked, and the city lives is on the Terminator line. And I thought the world building was great. I thought the characters were great. I thought the story was great. It it resolved itself in a satisfying way where it ends with me thinking there was going to be another, thinking she was planning on writing a series or sequel or something like that. But she has no, Charlie Jane Anders has no, um, said she's not going to continue it on like that. So it left me wanting more, but I wasn't disappointed in how it ended. It does sort of leave things open. It doesn't resolve everything, but even with that, it was so well written and it was such an amazing world, and the interactions with the characters and like the local life and the different factions of people on this planet, black market runners that move between these two cities on the planet, where one city is very controlled, very class based systems, very regulated with the times you're allowed to be awake, the times you can work, the times you can do certain things. And the other city is sort of the complete opposite, where uh, it's chaos. It's run by crime groups. It's, nightlife and partying and drugs and all this stuff. But just the parallels between the two, and the sort of light dark side between the two, and the attempt to like overthrow the government in the one city, and just what the characters go through. I loved it. It's an amazing book. Last Unicorn, give a B. Um, it was another fantasy book. It's this last unicorn on the planet goes on this adventure to try to find others of its kind. Has sort of this dream and premonition that he's got to find the Red Bull to find him, and just sort of collecting this ragtag group of people that goes on this adventure with him. It was a fine book. It was short. It was beautifully written and everything like that. It just wasn't a book for me, so I'm giving it a B, walking away from it. All Tomorrows by C.M. Kozman. This was a digital book I read, um, and it was great. I recommend looking into this. It was just this super short um, story about just this horrific, horrific thing, where it's about there's this race of aliens that uh, sort of is on this galactic timeline where they just move through the galaxy in a cycle, and they kill and wipe out or alter any species they find. And once they come upon man and man fights back, they decide to just do these horrible, horrible things to mankind as, retribution for them daring to fight them. And it's about all these different planets that are seeded with all these different like mutated and altered version of mankind, and just these terrible terrible things that they do to these people. Like they take us, like alter man enough to live on this planet of like high gravity, where they're just like these flat squished beings that crawl around. And it's just this quick sort of story, sort of like a history story of the far 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 future, talking about how all these different races were created by the offshoot of man due to this intervention by this horrible horrible alien race that does this to them. And like there's one planet they were so mad at for what they did in this war that they like turned all the people of the planet into like this living carpet of beings, like a one giant mass of bodies that encompass the globe, that can't speak or talk or do anything, but they can remember what was done to them. And it's this horrifying story, but it was this awesome, awesome story. So I highly recommend looking into it and trying to read it for yourself. But yeah, it was great. You know what? I talked myself and putting it into S. It was like, and there's amazing art in it, and it was just disturbing and creepy, and it was just this cool concept from start to end. So yeah, that's definitely going S. Um, Red Rising by Pierce Brown. I'm giving this one an A. I didn't know. I've heard the second one from this is amazing in this series, the Red Rising saga. I didn't really feel like getting into it. I did an audiobook of it, so I felt my best way to get into this stories was by audiobook. And uh, it was another end up being sort of a school story where it's this member of this sort of servitude slave people that are living underground in Mars, and they're being told to that they need to work and create the planet to be livable by humans, and their sacrifice and their hardship is for this greater good. But it ends up being that the surface has been populated forever, and there's these different factions of like red, golds is the top, red's the bottom. And so this one member of this red sort of servitude tribe gets physically altered and trained to be a gold. And he's supposed to infiltrate the society from above and topple it from above. And it's him in this sort of school and training, which I was like, I didn't know I was going into this. I didn't want to get into this type of story, but it was very interesting and fun because it was um, war games pretty much. Everything that they're learning is how to conquer and rule and manage a civilization. And so the students just get thrown in this valley with limited resources, or different groups have different resources, and they just are left to their own devices. They have to conquer or ally or do something to be one, group at the end. And it goes to very cool places, and the technology in it is interesting. So I'm interested. Yeah, I will continue on the series. And read the next one or two maybe at least, but it was good enough for me to really enjoy it at the time. But just the sort of same sort of tropes and everything that annoy me kept it out of being an S. Axis by Robert Charles Wilson, second book in the Spin Saga. I have to give, what do I give Spin? I gotta give this one a C. And there was nothing wrong with the story, and there was nothing wrong with his writing, but going from Spin, which was this huge, like, grand scope story that's covering like millions of years of the solar system, and just what they do with that concept of uh, the world being in this spin membrane while moving slowly through time while the rest of the world is normal speed. So it's and going from that and the hypotheticals, this race that's doing that, and then moving to Access, it just felt too small and too personal of a story. And it just did not hit me the same way. And it did not impress me the same way. And the characters I weren't as interested in. And I was really hoping for more answers about the hypotheticals in this one, but it's the middle book in a series. So they're not going to release explain anything. It's it's a small story up until the very end where it opens up the door into this big story, and then it's over. And so, yeah, I don't know. There was nothing wrong with it, but just in comparison to Spin, it was like this total letdown almost. But that's what it was. Timescape by Gregory Benford. I'll give this one a B. It was a fun story of um, parallel time or alternate timelines, not alternate, but like a past and present timeline where in the present timeline of the story, it's the future and the world has suffered from an ecological disaster, and animal species are dying off, and there's no food, and the world's heating up and all of this stuff. And this group of scientists decide to try to send tachyon bursts to the past to try to prevent this from happening in the future. But they're trying to do it so subtle enough and without giving anything away that they do not create a paradox, and a paradox inevitably happens. But it was a I really enjoyed the past story than more what was going on in the present. And the present story just sort of felt like a vehicle for him to explain the science about what was going on and explain what they were expecting to get out of the experiment and everything. Whereas the past, I felt, was the more of the mystery and the, trying to decipher this message and figure out what it means. And so I really enjoyed that aspect of it way more than the future one until near the end of the book. And then I thought the paradox that was created was clever, and the way the book ends, I really felt, satisfied with. But it was these two stories where one was way up here and the other one was like, it was fine. So that's why I'm giving it a B. Sinners, I'm giving an A by Pat Cadigan. This was a book that the more I think about it after reading it, the more I like it. This is another cyberpunk sort of story, but where Neuromancer I just couldn't get into throughout the whole book. This one, it took me a while to understand the flow and the characters and everything leading up for a certain point. But then when it clicks, it clicks. And when it gets that ball rolling, it starts rolling in a big way. And there's this sort of amazing event that happened that really captured my attention and really like drew me in and really made me want to keep reading. I was so hesitant at first with the first like 100 pages because it's this weird, it's the near future in LA, and following this group of like entertainment creators that create these immersive virtual reality experiences where you have to be in a full body haptic suit to get the senses of touch and everything like that, and plugged in, and like, or not plugged in, but just with like a visor on. And it's about this entertainment industry that, they figure out a way to directly connect into people's brains and get full, experience, like you've got full range of motion and full physical contact and everything. But it's just opens the door for pure creativity and being able to create anything your mind thinks of, and just how this technology sort of takes over people by being just plugged in forever and following this sort of main group of people. And something happens to one of them when they're plugged in, creating something, and it creates this sort of killer virus that just rampages through the system and kills people that are plugged in and kills people that witness it. And it turns into this crazy high intense story. And I really, really enjoyed it. And the more I think about it, the more I enjoyed it. And the more I think about sort of what happens with this virus and how it's created, I just think it's such a smart idea. And so this was sort of my first cyberpunk type story that really drew me in. And so I'd really recommend it. But that first 100 pages, it's rough and it's hard and it's confusing. And so it's keeping it out of the S for that reason. Never Let Me Go by Kaizu Ichiguro. I will give this one a B. Did this an audiobook. I had heard it was an amazing story. It was a good story. It was well written. It just wasn't for me. The sort of like twists in it just wasn't for me. And it's this beautiful story, like sort of love story, but I don't know. It, it, it didn't capture it enough for me. And I don't know how much I can say without spoiling it, but it's just following this girl as her experience in this sort of like boarding school, and her trajectory through life has been laid out for her for some reason that we learn about, and just her experiences growing up with sort of this knowledge of what's going to happen looming over her. And it's just this sort of coming of age story that's super emotional and it's slow paced and everything. And so it was a beautiful story, but it wasn't my type of story. Black Easter, James Blish. A. This another sort of religious James Blish story where it's written as if black magic is real, and like grimoires and everything are like actual books in our actual real world that are considered magical texts. What if those actually worked? And it's about sort of like religious ceremonies and religious exorcisms and stuff. What if all of that was real? And it's about this sort of um, gun runner, rich sort of warmonger hiring this famous black magician to do some jobs for him involving demons. And his end goal is he just wants to release all the demons that this black magician has under his power on the earth for one night, just to see what happens. And but it was just a cool concept and cool written, and the descriptions of the demons and the devils and everything is like from actual texts and actual like religious stories and religious ceremonies and everything. So just idea of what would happen in this regard, and what would happen if all the demons, not all the demons, but just this group of demons is let loose for 24 hours. And so it was really fun, really awesome. The Mote in God's Eye is getting an A by Jerry Pournelle and Larry Niven. It's kind of like the perfect first contact story is what everyone says by it. And it was a really, really good story, and this really interesting alien race that um, they create, and a really, really believable concept and idea with this alien race. But there was a lot of aspects of it I liked with the alien race and the different classes and the hierarchy of it. And um, the browns and the whites and the ruling class and everything, and the mystery of what's going on with these aliens and what they're hiding and everything like that, I thought was great. There was some aspects of the book that I felt like were common for the time. It was more just this cool thought experiment to me about like what an alien race that is designed and evolved like this, what would their system and civilizations feel like? And they've existed in this closed off system in this uh, star formation for longer than humans have been around, and just like the rise and fall of their civilizations and everything that's going on, it just thought was this cool idea. And then the concept of them being released out on the world, and it's this big uh you know mystery of the aliens and ticking time bomb that they will learn something to be able to escape this system and then spread out and cause war in the world. But yeah, so it was really good, and I have the sequel and I'll read the sequel. I don't think I'll get as much enjoyment out of the sequel as that one, but it was fine. Exhalation by Ted Chiang. This audiobook I did, it's a collection of his short stories. I'm going to give it a B. Couple stories in it I thought were interesting. There was one about like this, they were race of beings, all sort of like robot created individuals living in this enclosed space, like an enclosed system where like oxygen and pressure and everything is this very finite resource. And it's this scientist studying, he's able to like set up mirrors and instruments and everything, that he's able to take apart his own head and skull and study his brain as this sort of artificial being, and learn about them as a race in this way. And I thought that was a really cool idea. And they're discovering that the end of their universe is going to happen because there's the pressure is increasing in this enclosed space, and the oxygen's decreasing, and everything isn't able to function as high, so they're going to have to go to lower forms of consciousness and all of this stuff. And I thought that story was great, but it was the only one that really stood out to me. There was one with like virtual pets that people get attached to, and the pets are able to like inhabit it like a real animal body and learn and experience and stuff. And it was the longest out of them. Can't remember what that one was called, but it was fine. But um, I don't really remember the other ones from it as an audiobook. But Journey Beyond Tomorrow by Robert Sheckley. This is an S for me for sure. If you've seen my other review videos, this book totally caught me off guard. This book was not what I was expecting at all. I was expecting this classic, typical science fiction story of robots taking over the world. But it was one of the funniest stories I've ever read. It was this crazy, like, vignettes of these different things that this main character is going through, and just like his experience growing. He grew up on these like small Polynesian islands separate from the world, and when his parents dies, he decides he's going to go back to America, the land where his family's from. And just from day one stepping on American soil, like just the crazy stuff that happens to him, and everything is just so funny and so well written, and it was just this total caught me off guard, and I loved it. I It was one of my favorite books of the year, and I have to give it an S. Oh, The Gunslinger by Stephen King. Let me give it an A. This is the second time I've been going through the series, and I read this first one. It's shortest of the Dark Tower series, and I loved it. It's a great story. It's a great little story, and about sort of this gunslinger. He's following this man in black through the desert and trying to catch up to him for some reason we don't know, and just sort of the experiences he goes through along the way, and him searching for the Dark Tower. And it's just, it wasn't, when I read it the first time, it wasn't like any Stephen King I'd read before, and it's still pretty unique after reading a lot more of his stuff, but it's his sort of like epic grand tale. But it was this great read that I recommend to my family and everybody. You don't have to continue on in the series if you don't want to. It's kind of leaves it on a cliffhanger, but it's satisfying enough that you can just walk away from it. So I'll give it an A. Parable of the Sower by Octavia E. Butler. This is an A. Um, yeah, it's this great story about, near future, world's gone to ruin, economic turmoil, environmental, global warming's happening, and it's just about this girl and her family living in this gated community, and just how they're surviving in this world, and what happens to her family in this community. And she ends up having to be on the run, and this connection she's making with people along the way. And this is the book I like. I should have started with this one as my first taste of Octavia Butler, but it was so brutal at times that it totally caught me off guard, and I wasn't expecting it. But she writes things so brutally honest and doesn't pull any punches, and it was great. The only thing holding it from the S is there's like this through story about main character is creating her own religion. She calls Earthseed. And I thought that wasn't needed for me. She has this sort of like hypersensitivity where she will physically experience people's pain and pleasure if she's close to them, or she can see them. And some cases, like if she sees people bleeding, she'll start bleeding herself. And it gives her this different aspect and adds a different twist to this sort of typical post-apocalyptic fall of society story. And it's part of her reason for creating this religion and her earth seed idea of, but it just, the sort of the earth seed stuff, it just didn't stick for me. It didn't stick with me, and I'm still looking for the sequel. I know I could just like order it online, but I love finding these books at used bookstores or at local stores and stuff like that, and I can't find the sequel. So I'm super interested to where it goes. It ends on like, not a downer or anything. It ends on sort of a high note, this first one, but it's very much not resolved. So I need to resolve it. I hate to have to do it again, but I think I have to call this part two of ranking my 2025 books in review. And this is just, it's taken a lot longer than I was expecting. I didn't know what to expect since it's the first time I was trying this out, but we're going to pick it up again for part three. And hopefully you'll stick around to find what my favorite books were for the year. So thanks. We'll see you next time.